The space for innovation within the Indian aviation industry is large. Inspiration to drive that innovation can come from varied observations. That's why Mr. Nalin Jain is a driven man. As President and CEO of GE Aviation and Transportation South Asia, he plans to raise the industry standard for fuel efficiency, reliability and outstanding service to meet the rapid growth expected over the next 2 decades.
Indian aviation industry doesn't have a very long history in terms of when the industry really revived and took off. So if you go back to 2004, that's where the low-cost carriers boom started when Air Deccan got launched. And since then it's been off and on. There were 4 or 5 years of good growth from 2008, 2009 onwards, where airlines ended up ordering a lot of aircraft and pumped a lot of capacity into the market. They started feeling some of the pressure on profitability. And of course, the recession also hit at that time. There was a downturn in the market. So all in all, between 2008 and 11, I would say, there was a time period of consolidation, course correction, and the airlines tried to plug the losses which they were making by cutting down on capacity, rationalizing routes, and everything else. But I would say last year and a half has been much more positive since 2012. With FDI coming in the last 1 year, airport infrastructure in place. I mean, if you go to smaller towns even today like Jaipur, Udaipur, there are good airports available, air capacity is there. So I think it's a question of time. We've baselined the market right now, and from here onwards I expect growth to happen. India has all the fundamentals in place for growth to happen. It starts with the large population, a population which likes to travel for various reasons, including business, meeting friends and relatives, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the famous Indian middle class of 300 million people. And today what we have is only 60 million passengers who are flying. So obviously there is a huge opportunity when it comes to how much growth can happen. What really needs to trigger this growth, if I may say so, are a few things. One is, aviation as an industry has always been played out by the government a lot. And the role of the government is never insignificant in a regulated sector like aviation. So the government needs to define this as a national priority, purely in terms of GDP growth, in terms of economic activity, as well as connecting people. And once you do that, you would have the right framework, right regulatory infrastructure in place. Then, once you have that enabling environment, the airline industry is bound to take off because, as I said earlier, all the fundamentals are in place. FDI is a huge game changer. If you look at the global aviation industry, I think there are 2 models which have been successful. One of them being there's a large domestic demand, good examples being China, Indonesia, India, and so on and so forth. And domestic carriers have established themselves and grown. But as I mentioned earlier, Indian carriers are relatively young, nascent, new to this business and industry. And to that extent, what foreign direct investment does to this industry is it brings in the right amount of capital, expertise, experience. Being an international airline is never easy. Having a partner like a Middle East carrier or a Singapore Airlines will bring in the know-how, the experience and the depth which is required to succeed in the long haul. I think it's a growth market. I mean, end of the day, India is the second most populous country in the world. I think there is enough potential for everybody to invest. The question is whether you've got the right infrastructure, right cost structure, and right regulatory environment in place or not. From a G standpoint, that's the way we look at this market right now, and that's why we are invested in this market for the long term. We not only power 4 of the 5 airlines in this country, which are operational today, But we also have an MRO facility coming up in Nagpur with Air India to overhaul some of the large engines. We have a training school in Hyderabad for CFM engines, which is a joint venture between SNECMA and GE. GE has introduced some new services which will help optimize networks, which will help optimize the utilization of the assets, which is our newest strategy called the Industrial Internet. And last but not the least, and this is a new dimension which we added into our product portfolio, is something called performance-based navigation. This is a navigation solution which is used for approaching airports to reduce track miles, improve throughput. And this is something which we are starting to pilot with the Airports Authority of India through a USTDA granted project right now under the aegis of US-India Aviation Cooperation Program.